Hi everyone, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and all participants. Welcome to this live conference focused on the Iranian threat to Israel and their impact on the Middle East. Organized by the Machiavelli Center for Political and Strategic Studies, I'm Alice, and I'll be the moderator for this live event. Before we begin, I would like to emphasize the importance of the open debate. Therefore, I encourage all participants, including our viewers, to actively engage in the conversation, asking questions and writing their opinions in the comment section. We will try to read and answer your questions. The relationship between Iran and Israel has been a subject of great concern and scrutiny, with far reaching implications, not only for regional stability, but for world security. Throughout this conference, we aim to delve into the various aspects of this issue, exploring the motivations, strategies, and potential consequences of Iranian threats to Israel. Now, let me introduce our participants, our panelists. Victoria Coates, Vice President of the Heritage Foundation and former member of the Trump administration. Hi, Victoria. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Hello.
Then we have Efraim Inbar, President of Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Hi, Efraim.
Hi.
Then we have Alexander Grinberg, security expert of Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Hi.
Buongiorno.
And the last one, our Director of International Relations of Machiavelli Center and expert in political and strategic studies. As the moderator, I will be responsible also for timekeeping. So to ensure dynamic discussions, I kindly request that each of our answers during the question rounds does not exceed 5 minutes in length. Without further ado, I invite our president, Daniele Scalea, to deliver his opening remarks, setting the stage for our discussion.
Thank you, Alice. I will be very brief. I'm really glad to open this online conference on a topical issue that is a bit too much neglected, in my view, in the current European debate, because everyone is focused on Ukraine or Russia, and fully understand why. But I think that we cannot forget about the Mediterranean theater, about the Middle East, with their strategic importance, with their also potential of instability. As Italians, we are more inclined than others to watch to these areas because our main national interest actually dual there. This is why, as Machiavelli Center, we want to stir up a debate on those regions and their issues. I'm very happy that we can do it today with Dr. Coates from the Heritage Foundation, a very important and very prestigious institution. We pride ourselves to have partnered with in recent years in many initiatives. This year, for the third year in a row, we are going to host a joint conference in Rome with Heritage Foundation. I would like to take this occasion also to thank James Carafano for the role he played in forging this partnership, and I am now keen on the opportunity to cooperate with you, Dr. Coates, as well. And coming to Israel, Israel is a natural ally for Italy in the Mediterranean. This is also because of the many historical and cultural ties we have. I'm thinking about the very ancient Jewish community in Italy, important throughout our history. Many Italian Jewish patriots played a major role during the Italian Risorgimento. After the tragedy of the last century, a huge number of Jews left our country and have moved to Israel, but they have not usually totally severed the ties with our country. More generally, there is a sort of kindredship between Europe and Israel. I would dare to say that Israel is a European nation on the other side of the Mediterranean. And as a conservative, I cannot help but think that Israel is a role model of a country, of a Western country, culturally Western country, that actually managed to maintain its national identity, its national pride, its historical roots. And so also for this reason, I'm I can't wait to listen to your debate and your insights.
So, thanks, Mr. President. Let's get started. My first question is for Efraim Inbar. So, a couple of years ago, you wrote an article assessing that the Islamic Republic will never give up the quest for the bomb, that no other country has an appetite for military confrontation with Iran, but only Israel cannot tolerate a nuclear Iran. So, your conclusion was an escalation is probable. Are you still of this opinion? And does Israel have the military capability to stop Iran's nuclear program? And in the end, at what point might it choose to act? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Machiavelli Institution to host us. Yes, I'm still thinking more or less the same. Iran has not changed. Iran sees Israel as a religious sacrilege, and it is led by religious peoples that take the religion seriously, maybe too seriously, and therefore they sing at every soccer match, the people, death to Israel and death to America. We are the small devil. It's not a big, compliment, and we take seriously when a country thinks that we should be dismantled. Moreover, I think Iran, that aspires to be the hegemonial power in the Middle East, has a good strategic reason to see Israel destroyed, because we are the only power in the Middle East that can oppose them, particularly at this time when America seems to lower its profile in the Middle East and is busy with other fronts, maybe with good reason, but with America outside here, it is only Israel that can block the Iranian attempts to assert its hegemony over the region. And I think this became quite clear to many Arab countries, and this is probably one of the main reasons for the Abraham Accords that were established a few years ago. So Iran has not desisted from its sophisticated attempts to destroy Israel. It established a ring of fire around Israel via its proxies in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Gaza, and they use those proxies to bleed Israel in order to eventually to make their people leave. They don't think that we can be easily defeated in a conventional war, but they use other means in order to make the lives of Israelis difficult. And it's what we see now in the northern part of Samaria. It is actually part of Iranian doings against Israel, encouraging terrorism against the state of Israel. I understand that my time is limited, and for the sake of the debate, I'll stop now.
So, thank you, Inbar. Now we move on the next panelist, Alexander Grinberg. Hi, Alex. My first question for you is looking ahead, how do you envision the future trajectory of Iranian threats to Israel and the wider region? What are the key factors that will shape this trajectory, and what steps should be taken to mitigate the risks and promote long-term stability?
Buongiorno, grazie bene. I'm very happy to talk here. Thanks to Chandra Machiavelli. Well, I speak in English. So yes, the future threats. First of all, the major threat is that Iran may acquire nuclear weapons. If it happens, it may usher in several very dangerous developments, such as nuclear proliferation. It means if Iran has nukes, so Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt will follow them. It's clear that it's not a good development. Second is expansion of Iranian destabilizing influence. It means that Iran does not occupy adjacent countries, but it feeds instability, and it also becomes more dangerous because Iran supports terrorist and armed movements in those countries. And if Iran acquires nukes, it will become an unbearable risk for Israel, because then the power of Hezbollah will be doubled, meaning that the main threat for Israel is not Iran per se alone, but Hezbollah. As of now, Hezbollah is able to destroy half of Israel because it has an arsenal of long-range missiles and rockets that can strike every point within Israel. And it means also numerous civilian casualties, which is unusual for Israel. And if all that is doubled by Iranian nuclear umbrella, then this threat becomes unbearable that the state of Israel will never take. Though this said, Iranian nuclear threat is not in this sense that Khamenei decides tomorrow to drop an A-bomb on Israel. It's not the case. The regime needs nukes for its survivability, but on the way it is also a dangerous threat. But yes, it should be noted that for the moment it is not clear that Iranian regime decided to acquire nukes. It seems that they use their threshold state status to extort more concessions from the West. To counter these threats, several things are necessary. First, American threats must be clear. Even though America does not intend to use a nuclear option, it should never show it that Iran understands that this military option is off the table. If America refrains from a military action, it should allow Israel to act alone if needed. And concluding the issue, my remark is that the musings by some pundits in the West warning against an attack on Iran, that it will usher in a regional war, have no basis. No risk of regional war exists because Iran has no allies. No one will fight aside Iran against Israel or against America, except for Hezbollah.
Thanks for such a complete reply. Then now I will pose a question to Victoria Coates. Hi, Victoria. After more than 2 years of trying and failing to restore the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, the Biden administration appears to have given up on it. But recently, according to media reports, United States and Iranian officials have held indirect talks in Oman to further discussions over Tehran's nuclear program and other issues. How far do you think the Biden administration will be able to go in this dialogue with the Islamic Republic? The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Alice and Daniele, and to all of our friends at the Machiavelli Center. This is a relationship Heritage obviously prizes greatly. we really appreciate your collaboration, and wonderful also to be on with colleagues in Jerusalem. I think Jerusalem and Rome may be my two favorite foreign cities, so this is a good event for me. You are
welcome to visit us.
Be careful what you ask for. Bear in mind, I have a PhD in Italian Renaissance art history, so I have a great fondness for Rome. But I think, the issue of the JCPOA, the Obama era nuclear deal, is a sort of article of faith for the Biden administration. They put so much stock into the negotiation of it during the Obama administration, and the structure of the deal seems to be what really attracts them so much, that it is a multinational deal. We had the P5+1 involved in it. One thing that always struck me as curious, perhaps mostly from an Italian standpoint, is that the deal had both the EU and then the Germans and the Brits and the French at the table, so which seemed curious to me. It seemed to me you either were going to be the EU or you were going to be the individual countries, but to have both of them was odd in that structure. And then the whole thing was implemented through the United Nations Security Council rather than passed through the United States Senate as a treaty. And so that's why President Trump could get out of it. A lot of people complain that, the United States gave their word, the deal was signed. Nothing was ever signed. The only person who gave their word, as far as I can tell, was John Kerry. And, the issue you run into there is if you don't go to the trouble of convincing the American people that this is a good idea, then your successor can get out of it. Now, as you say, Alice, the Biden administration seems determined to get back into it. Oman was where the original discussions led by Bill Burns, who's now our CIA director, again, during the Obama administration, that's where they started it. So apparently they're going back to that playbook. But they've really stubbed their toe over the last 2 weeks when it's been revealed that Rob Malley, who's their lead negotiator in this round, has had his security clearance suspended for mishandling classified information. That we don't have any details of specifically what happened, but that's going to cause a huge problem for this process. And so it may be at this point, just for logistical reasons, they can't get it done, but it's certainly something we're watching very carefully here in Washington. I think you're muted, Alice.
The microphone, Alicia.
Thank you, Victoria. So let's move on. Guglielmo Picchi, happy to see you today. My question for you is, in light of your former role as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, I want to focus on Italy. The new Italian government has placed great emphasis on Rome's role in the Mediterranean. How do you think it will affect relations with Israel and Iran?
Well, starting with Israel, this is maybe the most pro-Israel government that, in the last 75 years of history of the Italian Republic. So this is a good chance for Israel and Italy to develop very strong ties and to revert what is going on at many, multilateral level, whereby Italy did not play the role of real good friend of Israel as in reality is. So the first thing that I would expect from this government is finally to have great support of Israel and all the security questions that Israel has put on the table to be strongly supported at UN and EU level and at any multilateral forum. Then it's very true that Italy is putting lots of effort to be a leader in the Mediterranean for a number of reasons that we have. Prime Minister Meloni recently announced the so-called Mattei plan, that is, a plan that is currently being is being realized, finalized within the Foreign Ministry of Italy and the presidency of the Council of Ministers. That is, a full comprehensive approach to Africa, not just to North Africa, but to the entire Africa, which is on the diplomatic, social engagement, cultural, energy security, military cooperation, and security cooperation. First of all, focused on stopping migrants coming to Italy, but on a larger picture is a way of putting together all the bits and pieces that Italy has in Africa. A strong cooperation for development, a strong energy presence, a number of military missions at EU and bilateral level. So it's a priority really for this government, for this administration to put the Mediterranean at the center of our foreign policy. Hence, it's a real opportunity for Italy and for Israel to build a stronger relationship. There is a very good understanding between the Italian Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Salvini, and the leadership of Israel with Netanyahu. So also this being like-minded, but being conservative would help to strengthen further the relation. If the view goes then to Iran, while historically Italy and Iran were always good trade partners, I mean, since back then in the years when I was at the foreign ministry, so 5 years ago, the economic interaction between Italy and Iran is basically reduced to zero. So interaction now are very limited. There is still some people in the administration, mostly at diplomatic level, they still think that we are in the good old days of having a good partnership with Iran. I would say the political approach of the current administration is pretty clear. There is no room for threats to Israel, to any other country. We don't favor very much, any nuclear program of Iran. And to answer to Victoria, which I congratulate for the new role as Vice President of Heritage, it's not odd that in the JCPOA, the EU has one seat, and then three, although the Brits are out now. Germany and France were along. EU never had a foreign policy. Was, I would say, by chance that it was present at the JCPOA. So I'm not surprised that then the things went in the wrong direction. But to be honest, I don't see, or I've not seen so far, any real step from this government, the Italian government, towards Iran. There's basically no interaction whatsoever, no cooperation whatsoever. And so it's now Israel's chance to build on a good conservative understanding and to leverage on a conservative government in Italy.
So thank you, Guglielmo. And then we start the second round. My first question is for Victoria. You were involved in the making of the Abraham Accords, partly in the White House and partly in the Energy Department. 3 years later, how do you assess the results from those accords? Is the Biden's arrival in the White House significantly affecting the normalization of Arab-Israeli relations?
Well, that's a great question, Alice. The Abraham Accords were, I think, the major national security achievement of the Trump administration, and we came to it sort of sideways, you might say, in that for the first year of the administration, I was working closely with Jason Greenblatt and Jared Kushner on what we thought was going to be a deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. which, we've all long labored under the assumption that you had to get to that deal before you could do broader deals with the Arab nations and Israel. And, that's the path we went down. Now, the Palestinian Authority decided not to engage with us on any level for a variety of reasons, and really missed a historic opportunity for the Palestinian people to broker a lasting, equitable deal, which obviously is in Israel's best interest, to get the situation resolved if possible. But they just wouldn't. And what was interesting to us is the Arab countries, particularly UAE and Bahrain, started reaching out quietly and saying, we just can't give them a veto over our foreign policy anymore. We're going to have to move forward with this. And, much credit to both of the leadership of both those countries, and then later on Morocco, for having the vision to carry this through. And so, we really reversed it and said that no, that it is possible to get deals between Arab nations and Israel, even without resolution to the Palestinian issue. And, obviously, it would have been great to get a second term. The deal that everyone's talking about now is Saudi Arabia. I'm just back from Riyadh a couple of weeks ago. And honestly, everybody in Riyadh is talking about when, not if. Obviously, they want to get their own deal that may or may not be an Abraham Accords structure. But, the problem is you don't have the same credibility with the governments, with the Biden administration. So there's not a lot of faith in the administration. They have not put a top diplomat into Riyadh. So we don't have somebody functioning the way, say, John Rakolta functioned in Abu Dhabi. David Friedman functioned in Jerusalem under the previous administration to sort of midwife this process. So it may have to wait till potentially a Republican administration. There will be congressional involvement, particularly if the Saudi civil nuclear program is on the table. The Congress has to approve that. But it gives me a lot of hope that even under a administration that is not as interested in the Middle East, certainly not as interested in Saudi or Israel as the Trump administration was, that this progress towards peace, towards regional coordination is still going on. And so, as I said, I think that's our greatest legacy as the Trump administration, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to build on it in the future.
So your comprehensive response has shed light on the matter. Thank you. Then I go back to Efraim Inbar. So my question for you is this time is about the fact that on March 10th, Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore diplomatic ties 7 years after severing relations and after waging a long proxy war between them. What could be the object or the interest behind this shift from confrontation to collaboration? How is Israel reacting to this rapprochement? Has it triggered a security alert for you?
So on whether Israel has military capabilities to destroy the Iranian infrastructure. And while this is not an easy job, but I must say that there was not such a thing as an impregnable target. I served many years as a paratrooper, and I know that if you are ready to pay the price in terms of casualties, if you are ingenious enough, you can take every target. And this is true of Iran. And I think that everybody realizes that we have intelligence presence there, we know what's happening there, and we can reach any target in Iran. We may have to pay a price, but I think the issue is extremely important. It is existential, and Israel will try at a point to do it. It depends primarily on our preparations and the international circumstances. Now, about Saudi Arabia and Iran, I think it is not something of a threat to Israel. It was basically a decision of the Saudi Arabia to slap the United States for its attitude toward MBS and the regime. And the Saudis and Iranians remain rivals. Iran is a Shiite country, Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country, both claim to be the religious leaders of their sects, religious sects, and they are vying for regional hegemony, for leadership in this area. So I don't think they'll become good friends. They decided for some reasons to lower the tensions, but I don't think they will be able to cooperate effectively because they don't want to. The decision, this rapprochement, as if it's a rapprochement, does not affect Saudi-Israeli relations, which are mostly under the table. And once under the table in the Middle East was very crowded. After the Abraham Accords, they came out, and maybe we'll have relations also, diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure. I'm less optimistic than many in Jerusalem and in Washington, as long as MBS has not secured his regime. I doubt if he will take such a step to normalize relations with Israel that may estrange part of the ulema, the religious establishment, and many of his cousins. He has many of cousins that don't like he's taking this job. And so he needs to, first of all, to neutralize the opposition to the regime before opening relations with Israel. And the decision to have diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia will not affect his calculations on that issue.
Thank you, Efraim. Now I will switch to Mr. Grinberg. So, the Iranian threat is not limited to the Middle East, as it has the potential to affect other regions, including Europe. In your opinion and security terms, what are the potential implications of these threats for European security, and how should the European nations respond? The floor is yours.
Iran is noteworthy that Iran never acts alone. In each its action, the Iranian regime relies on Hezbollah. There are expanded Hezbollah networks in South America. It's drug cartels also. And there are also Hezbollah activities in nearly in every country of Africa where there are Lebanese communities that are automatically related to Hezbollah and Iran. This said, it is noteworthy that Iran never targets specific European countries. So they may dislike the West, but Iran does not consider any European country as its foe. Yet Iran uses European countries as a platform to carry out assassinations of Israelis and Jews, of course. They've already done it. And first of all, Iranian opposition members, which they have been done since the revolution in 1979. And it means that, for example, Mujahideen Khalq, who act in France, they are also exposed to Iranian threats because they are Iranian opposition and they want to kill them. Or they may abduct Iranian journalists or dissidents to a third country and then from there abduct him or her to Iran. In Iran also blackmails, for example, European binational citizens, meaning Iranians who are also Italians or French and Brits, those citizens, European citizens who can travel to Iran are always in risk because Iran takes them as hostages to blackmail the UK or France or any other country to exert again concessions. Or in the solution to that, there is no one simple solution, but of course, what is needed, first of all, is a joint work that if one country has its own calculations vis-a-vis Iran that contradict the calculations of another country, so it's a problem. And the last thing is that Iran must pay the price for its doing, because all their modus operandi is based upon an assumption that no country will dare do anything. For example, if the IRGC speedboats can approach a US warship without fearing immediate fire, it's a problem because they know this is what will happen. By the same token, if Iran knows that its diplomats will be expelled immediately after any such attempt of assassination, so it may work. Again, I don't say this is what resolves that problem once for all, but this is the situation. And again, Iran is not ISIS in the sense that it does not send the terrorists to everywhere they can. They're a country. And the last remark, it is very important to remember that the Iranian ideology, it is religious, yes, but it's not a classical Shia Islam. It is a fundamentalist religion, which is akin to a political radical ideology. And this Iranian ideology was heavily influenced by leftist, Marxist, anti-democratic ideas. I may send to you all in a chat a link to a search. I've just done a search about the connection between Gramsci, revolutionary thought, and the Iranian revolutionary thought. You will see plenty of great pictures. So it is an ideology that is very similar to the Soviet or any Marxist totalitarian ideology.
Thank you, Alex. That's so interesting. And at the end of this question round, I'd like to ask Mr. Picchi his opinion on an important element. So, NATO today appears to have returned to focus on the northeastern side toward Russia, as it has not since the Cold War. Israel, meanwhile, has moved from the scope of US European Command to that of CENTCOM. Are we witnessing a strategic shift of Europe away from the Middle East and Israel in particular?
We don't hear you.
So my general answer would say no. We have a contingent threat, that is the war in Ukraine, that requires, of course, attention. We have one new member that borders with Russia, that is the Finland. We're waiting for the Turkish leadership to give the green light to Sweden. So having a war at the real borders of NATO in Ukraine, and with the supply of weapons that NATO gave to Ukraine, there is, of course, a contingent attention on this scenario. On the other, there is a great focus on the Indo-Pacific. NATO recently opened a communication office in Japan. So I would say that we are in front of a revitalized NATO that is going to concentrate on many different fronts and threats. And I don't see a real issue for Israel being moved from the European command to the CENTCOM command of the US. Israel is a key ally to many Western countries. It's a bastion of freedom, of democracy and security in the Middle East. So it's a real friend to all of us. And so until we keep this friendship and these alliances, that is, in the case of Italy, is also, a very strong military alliance. For a number of reasons, in exchanging military programs, training, so on and so forth. Helicopter program, I helped to broker the helicopter deal and the simulator back in 1819. So until there is this, industrial and military cooperation and also friendship, there is no real, threat that, there is a slip away from traditional posture of NATO. We have a contingent situation that has very broader implication than the conflict itself. So of course we have to concentrate on that one. I say we as NATO, because it's critical to make sure that the Ukrainians are in the condition to free their own territory, to keep their their integrity, their sovereignty integrity. So this is really what, in my opinion, is going on. There is scope for, once the conflict is over, to have a much more intense dialogue between, many of the NATO countries and Israel. And I would say that Israel is, an integral part of the West, and a shifting of, technical comments from one side to the other is not really moving the attention and the friendship to Israel. To be noted that Egypt, which is physically in the African continent, is also in the CENTCOM rather than in an AfricaCom. So I don't see it a real problem whatsoever. Of course, there is some issues on the Biden administration and the ability of conducting foreign policy from the Biden administration. But I hope it's just a temporary issue that once back with the Republican serious administration will be quickly overcome.
So thanks again, Guglielmo. Now last round of questions. Let's get started with Victoria Coates. So now my question is, should Trump or another Republican candidate return to the White House? What are the most urgent actions he or she should take with respects to the Middle East?
Well, I think re-engaging with the Middle East should be the top priority, and making it clear that while the United States is very focused on the threat from communist China, that we can walk and chew gum, as is our saying, and that we realize that the location of the Middle East, and as Guglielmo was just saying, Israel is both part of the West and looks east into the Middle East and into Asia. This is such a sort of liminal space for the world, and so much of the world's shipping goes through the Middle East, and so much of the world's energy comes out of the Middle East that we really can't neglect it. So making sure, first and foremost, that the United States is present, that we are offering partnership, both in terms of economics and in terms of security, to our traditional partners and allies in the region. And that's the strongest possible message we can send to the regime in Tehran, that we are not letting up on them. We agree very strongly with the Israeli position that a regime that chants death to America and death to Israel routinely does demand our attention, and that we're going to try to starve them of the resources, both to develop a nuclear weapon, but also to fund their various proxy networks, including Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthi. They're all over the place with these militias. And, that's what they spend all of their money on. And going to the recent dust up in Jenin, I mean, that is all money that the Biden administration has flowed both into the Palestinian Authority, but then also allowed to flow into Iran through the non-enforcement of sanctions. So I think getting focused on the Middle East, taking a two-pronged approach, both in terms of outreach and friendship with partners and allies, and then very clear messages to our enemies that we're not going to tolerate their additional aggression, would go a long way towards stabilizing the situation. I think it would allow for, future developments like the Saudi deal we were discussing. I'm actually pretty optimistic about that one. And then also doing work in the Eastern Mediterranean with partners like Italy to increase energy cooperation, which I think is going to be a major theme of the second quarter of this century.
So thank you very much, Victoria. So we await the development of events of presidential election. Then my last question for Efraim Inbar this round is a future perspective. What are the geopolitical implications of these developments? How might other major powers such as the United States, Russia, or China respond to this situation? And what are the potential implications for their broader strategic interests? So the floor is yours.
I think the key issue is of course the United States, and unfortunately I'm less optimistic that we'll see a return of a Republican administration in Washington, which means if this is going to happen, that we will see further weakening of American international position. America is diverted his attention to the war in Ukraine, which I think should be ended as quickly as possible in order to allow America to face the Chinese challenge. I'm not sure this is what will happen. So with a very questionable position on part of the United States in world affairs, I'm afraid that we'll see greater Iranian aggression. China and Russia are its allies, the allies of Iran, because Iran is anti-American. We may see greater Iranian, Chinese revanchism in the Straits. Actually, I just came back from Taiwan, and one of my questions to our Taiwanese counterparts was, what has Beijing learned from the Russian invasion in Ukraine? And we didn't get an answer, a clear answer. So I'm really concerned that we, the conservatives that care about the free world, are not in the best position, vis-a-vis the totalitarian or autocratic regimes around us.
Okay, thanks, Efraim. I go back to Grinberg now. So, from a security perspective, what are the key vulnerabilities that Iran might exploit in its attempt to arm Israel? And what countermeasures should Israel consider to protect itself from asymmetric threats such as cyber attacks or unconventional warfare? The floor is yours.
Well, the main vulnerability of Israel is, of course, it's not secret, it's the lives of civilians, and it is, of course, terror attacks in Israel and also abroad against Israeli and Jewish civilians. I also would like to emphasize that the Iranian regime is anti-Semitic. It's not only anti-Zionist, it doesn't criticize these or other Israel's policies, but it is full of Holocaust denial and other pretty anti-Semitic things. There was an Iranian attack that was thwarted in Athens due to the efforts of the Mossad and the Greek intelligence before the Passover. So it was a classical modus operandi of Quds Force, meaning that the Iranians usually outsource, sorry for the parallel, the murder of civilians to their proxies, like Pakistani Shiites, Hezbollah, of course. And had it happened, it would have been terrible because it was perpetrated by two Pakistanis, and if we should say we had started to shout Iran, Iran, so no one knows. This is what the Iranians are doing, and again, it's not only a threat. I remind just in 92 and 94, there were two horrible terrorist attacks against the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, and also against the Jewish community in Buenos Aires in 94. It's that Iran is doing, is trying to do everywhere. This is the main vulnerability, and of course it targets also in this, for example, this attack in Athens. They targeted the visitors of Jewish restaurants. So it's not important whether it was Jews or Israelis. So this is the main danger. And second thing is feeding instability in the Palestinian territories and assisting terrorist movements like Hamas and the Islamic Jihad Palestine. Also, there is a difference between proxies and clients. Hamas is not Iran's proxy because it has its own interests. But Islamic Jihad is a pro-Iranian organization, a very lethal one, that depends wholly on Iranian funding. And the fact that as a country, a member of the United Nations, funds murder of civilians is unacceptable, I think. For this reason, any action against this regime is legitimate. Before we talk about nuclear things, and there is also another factor, which is feeding instability in North Africa and the Caucasus, which is very dangerous, meaning that Iran is helping Polisario Front, which Polisario Front is a Marxist Western Sahara guerrilla under the tutelage of Algeria, which is also the last remnant of ferocious Arab socialist regimes. And it also may create a potential for broader conflict between Morocco and Algeria, because Polisario fights Morocco, and the Caucasus, where the Iranians use Karabakh and Armenia as their front base to attack Azerbaijan. But again, they never do all these things that I evoke directly. It's through third countries, proxies, whatever, but there are Pasdaran intelligence in Nakhchivan in Azerbaijan. There is a Azeri militia founded by Soleimani. So the answer to that, simply improving there is no limit for improving and perfection of intelligence capacities. As I said, these capacities, intelligence work must be joint. That Israel is always doing that, and I don't think there are any problems regarding this between Israel and the other European country. I think which is just clear they don't do that. And well, I'm not a cyber expert, so I don't have very much to say about that. But the principle is that one should invest more in cyber capacities and cyber education. And the reason Israel a national cyber security center under the command of the security service, if I'm not wrong. So we are doing efforts in that domain. And yes, one should never forget that Iran is a well-developed country. It is not a country where they cannot do anything. They are good in reverse engineering. Iran is supplying loitering munitions, not drones. Shahed is a loitering munition. It's not a drone, properly speaking. They're sending that to Russia through Armenia with Armenia's consent. This is the reason for the visit of the CIA head Burns a year ago, if I'm not wrong, to Armenia. Of course, the Iranians carry out thoroughful post-operational research, and they are perfectioning this loitering munition or these drones, just as they were doing with the missiles that the Houthis launch on the Saudis. They're manufactured on the shore in Yemen by Hezbollah and RGC experts and engineers, and then the Iranians perfection these missiles, improving their guiding systems, and then deliver them to Hezbollah in Syria. So it's a vicious circle, if I may say so, of weapon delivery and cooperation. That's the last remark. It is true that I was born in Moscow. Russian is my mother tongue. I also monitor the developments in Russia and Ukraine. It is true that both parties, Moscow and Tehran, are making efforts of show off of a growing cooperation, strategic cooperation. It is true that Iran is refilling a specific niche of that the Russian military industry has traditionally neglected. But it is only that they're trying to find more fields for cooperation, but it's not really working because both countries are very corrupt, and it's difficult to decide who is more corrupt, Iran or Russia. And their real cooperation, even to annoy America, is they would like to, but it is very difficult.
So, thank you, Alex. Last but not least, Guglielmo Picchi, my question is about another actor in game. So, the Russian Federation seems headed for a phase of instability, as shown by international sanctions, difficulties in the conflict with Ukraine, and also the recent Wagner mutiny. How will all this affect the Middle East theater?
Well, first of all, I mean, Grinberg just mentioned that the attempts of cooperation, military cooperation between Iran and Russia. It's not a secret that my view is that the Russian Federation is going to lose badly the war against Ukraine. I mean, it's already a loss. I mean, not winning a war after 1.5 years for someone who considers itself, a superpower. But the wider implication of instability and less, efficient military machine of the Russian Federation is evident. Being short of manpower in Ukraine, the Russians had to recall a number of volunteers from many different scenarios. So they call people from Syria, from some African areas. So all the military consultants, that's the nice name the Russians give, that were present on many fields in African nation or in Syria or in Armenia, in Georgia, the South Ossetia troops, but also some of the Moldovan troops in Transnistria were somehow repatriated to Russia to fight the war in Ukraine, being short. So yes, the conference, the war has wider implication. Also, the recent Prigozhin and Wagner attempt coup, almost mutiny. I mean, call it as you prefer. Although there is, safeguards that Wagner or its successor entity might continue to operate in the Middle East and in Africa. Of course, there are factual consequences. I would say it in the positive way. So a weaker Russia, weaker Wagner creates instability, but gives also the possibility to the West to regain position and to put much more pressure on a number of countries that, losing the Russian support might be willing to come to better terms to the West. So generally, the collective security will improve. There is one element that is of concern. That is all the weapons that are going around the region. For the war in Ukraine and all this instability that the Wagner has, may relinquish a number of weapons, throughout the Middle East, Africa, and smuggling of weapons that could be, potentially get under, the hands of terrorist groups and create, terrorist attacks, or generally could be destabilizing in a number of countries, and Iran might take advantage of this situation. Having said this, one general comment that I would say I've heard, Iran, the ties with Venezuela, the Russian. It seems to me that although very dangerous, each and them are, it's like a coalition of the weak. So there are all countries that are struggling to give food to their own people. They are prioritizing, the weapons and suppression of dissent. And although we have many cases of the dissent being quieted by regimes for decades, there is always one moment where what is left of the public opinion will speak out and bring a regime change, and that is my hope also for Iran, that sooner rather than later, already all the dissent that has been in the streets and the squares of Iran might bring a collapse of the regime of the Ayatollah.
Thanks again, Mr. Picchi, and I'm grateful to all panelists for this discussion. But before we go, there's a special guest I would like to introduce. He's Mayan Samoun, the spokesman of the Israeli Knesset, expert in Iran and also in the Middle East. Hi, Mr. Samoun.
Ciao a tutti, sono felice essere qui. Did you say it right?
A little bit. Yeah. So, thank you.
I listened very carefully for everything you said, and it was absolutely fascinating. The main issue is that we are in the peak of the clash of civilization. Iran is just one side of this clash. And as Victoria said, the Abraham Accords is not just a business or it's not just a military status between Israel and some Arab countries. It's a formation against Iran, against the unfree world. This is the main issue that they have an Abraham Accords, and I think it was Alex that said that there is a connection between Iran and Russia. It's absolutely correct. And if you want to end this war for Israel and for Ukraine, we must end and cut the connection between Iran and Russia. Iran. It's funny because everyone thinks that Iran depends on Russia, and I sincerely think it's not correct. I believe with all my heart that Russia depends on in Iran. Iran is giving them information, Iran giving them intelligence, Iran giving them weapons, drones, missiles. Iran is using Ukraine as the playground. She is absolutely practicing before a war on Israel. This is the situation right now in Ukraine and Russia. And if we cut this connection, we will cut both problems for Ukraine and for Israel. And it's not just Israel. Israel, as usual, is the front line for Europe, for the United States, for the whole free world against terror attacks, against wars. If I might add, I just got informed that an Israeli citizen just have been murdered in the terror attacks in Samaria. Terrorists just went there, shoot and leave. The army is just now chasing them. So my condolences to my fellow Israeli. And I think it was Victoria that said it. If you cut down crime in Europe, if you cut down crime in all of the world, we cut down the terror, because this money finance the terror attacks. It's not just the nuclear agreement that the United States is trying to promote now. Actually, there is, I call it the little agreement, because they are saying that Iran will get her own money, but it's $100 million. It's not enough for a nuclear program. It's not enough for rebuild Iran, but it is enough for Hezbollah, for Hamas, for Fatah. This money is go straight and directly to terror upon Israel, and after Israel, it's Europe and United States and the other free world. So I sincerely believe that if we cut the connection between Russia, and Iran, if we cut the crime that's going out from Iran and its proxies, we will cut down the terror by tremendous percents.
Thank you, Marianne. We came to conclusion, so I want to express my sincere gratitude for all guests and also for the audience who follow us today. I hope to see you again in another occasion. So thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.